As we discussed in the last chapters, economics is the idea of making choices. We have unlimited wants, we have limited resources, so then we have to decide. We have to make choices of what we're going to do with our resources. Not only talking physical resources, we're not only talking material things, we're also talking time. I mean, we have 24 hours in a day, so we have to make decisions on what we do with that time. And those are economic decisions. We decide what's best. We look at our choices, we decide what's going to benefit us the most, and we make those choices. And that's what we look at with economics. And normally, the higher degree, the higher the salary. We're making choices all the time. You're making choices with your education. How far do we go with our education? Do we continue past the associate's degree? Do we continue past a bachelor's degree? Do we continue past the master's degree, or maybe even the doctorate? Where do we stop? Where do we go? We have to make those choices. There's choices and there's trade-offs. Can you afford the time? The idea that we have to put in so much time for our education. Can you compensate with the expense, the amount of money you have to pay for your education? So everything in life has decisions. Everything that we do has decisions. And that's what economics is based on. The example shown here, figure 2.2, is an example of how we have to make decisions. This particular example states that the budget that we have is $10. With that $10, burgers are $2, bus ticket is 50 cents. So we have to decide where our money is going to go to. Do we want to have 5 burgers and no bus tickets and spend that whole $10 on burgers? Or do we want to buy 20 bus tickets and not have any money for burgers? Or do we want to go someplace in between? Each of these points, B, C, D, and E, is using that total budget that's dispersed between burgers and bus tickets. Any place on this production possibility frontier uses all of our resources totally. We're being efficient when we're on that production possibility frontier line. In other words, every time we make a decision, we're going to spend that whole $10 any place on that production possibility line. Depicted in figure 2.3 on this slide here is another production possibility frontier line, showing the trade-off between social resources and healthcare. If we give all our resources, if we stay on that all of the resources that we have, and we talk about resources, we're talking about all of our land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, everything that we have that we can produce things in a country. And if we're on that production possibility frontier line, we're using all of our resources efficiently. In other words, everything we have. We're using all of our land, we're using all of our labor. Our employment, our numbers are low, unemployment is low. We're using all of our land, labor, capital, all of our buildings and machinery, and we're using all of our entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is what brings it all together. They take that risk to bring all those factors of production together and produce items. But in this particular case, we can see that if we devote all of our resources to healthcare, we're not going to be able to make any education, not put any resources in education. We'd be at that point A where all of our resources would be put into that healthcare market. If we decided to put all of our resources into education, we'd be at that point F. We'd have everything in education, and we wouldn't put anything at all into healthcare. Normally, we're someplace on that production possibility frontier line, somewhere B, C, D, or somewhere in between, to we're putting some resources in healthcare, some resources in education, and we'll change that. As long as we're on that production possibility curve, though, we're working efficiently. We're using all of our factors of production efficiently. Here again, we're showing the production possibility frontier curve, and we're showing the healthcare and education and what choices we have to make. As long as we're on that production possibility frontier line, we're working efficiently and we're using all of our resources. But they're showing a point R in here. Anytime we're inside that production possibility curve, anytime we're inside that production possibility frontier line, we're inefficient. We're not using all of our resources. we're not using all of our land. We're not using all of our labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Normally, the first one to go is that labor. We just came out of a recession period where we weren't working efficiently because a lot of our labor was unemployed. We got up to over 10% unemployment during that period of time. So anytime that we're inside that production possibility frontier line, we're not working efficiently. We're not working everything. As long as we're on that line, as long as we're at A, B, C, D, or F, E or F, or anywhere in between, any place on that production possibility frontier line, we're working efficiently and we're using all of our resources efficiently. Opportunity cost is something we always have to consider in economics. Opportunity cost is the cost of what you give up to do something. If you're in class, you're giving up that time. You're giving up that hour and 15 minutes each day that you're here. That's time that you could be spending doing something else. So opportunity cost defined as normally that next best alternative that you could be doing, or that next best alternative that you could have spent your money on than what you did. If you go down to the cafeteria and you buy a sandwich for $6, that $6 is gone, right? You're not going to have that $6 to spend again. It's a foregone opportunity. What else could you have done with that $6? That next best alternative is that opportunity cost. You came here and you spent your time in the classroom. What's the next best thing you could have done with that hour and 15 minutes in the classroom? You maybe went to a show, you could have went shopping. That next best alternative is what your opportunity cost, so what you give up. And every time you make a decision, there's an opportunity cost. Every decision has an opportunity cost. Your opportunity cost of getting an education is that possibility that you could be working, making money. You'd have more time with your family. You're giving up something when you're getting your education. You're spending money on that education. That money could have been used for something. In this particular example, figure 2.5, we're looking at two different production possibility curves, and we're seeing that sugarcane and wheat is on the sugarcane is on the x-axis. Sugarcane is on the y-axis. Wheat is on the x-axis. And we're seeing that one curve is flatter than the other. The U.S. production possibility curve is flatter, meaning that our opportunity cost for making wheat or sugar is not very much. It's not that much different. Whereas in Brazil, there's a big opportunity cost. We have to give up a lot of wheat to make sure, or a lot of sugar to make wheat. So we have a comparative advantage, or Brazil, I would say, has a comparative advantage in making sugarcane. And the United States has a comparative advantage in making wheat when we're looking at the two. And anytime we talk about comparative advantage, we're comparing one to another. In this case here, we're comparing the United States to Brazil. So and when we're comparing these items, Brazil would have the comparative advantage in making sugarcane, and the United States would have the comparative advantage in making wheat because of the opportunity cost that we would have to give up. The opportunity cost that Brazil would have to make wheat is quite a bit of sugarcane. So they're better off to put their resources into making sugarcane, exporting that sugarcane to the United States, and buying wheat from the United States. And that's where trade comes in. We'll talk about that more in future chapters. This slide is showing two production possibility frontier curves here. The individual opportunity set and the social production possibility frontier curve. The idea here is that in most cases in society, when we give up something, we're not going to get the same amount in return. We call that the law of diminishing returns. In other words, if we look at this first production possibility set, the individual opportunity set, if we've got two classes that we're working in, say economics and math, we think we're better in math, and so we need more study time in math. But we got so many hours to study. We've got 12 hours to study. We divide those hours up somewhere on this production possibility curve to where we can spend more time in one than the other. So if we spend 12 hours studying, we may decide that we need to spend 6 hours of each and be somewhere in the center. If we think we have better skills in math, we may spend more time in in studying economics. But when we give up that time to study the other subject area, we have that same opportunity cost. We're giving up. We're getting what we give. In other words, we give up 2 hours to study in one. We get that 2 hours to study in the others. That's not always true in society. When we're producing something, most items are not produced exactly the same way. So when we're talking about all of our resources, all of our factors of production, our land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, if we're making computers and television sets, it may take more labor to make those computers. It may take more time to make those computers. So we may have to give up more television sets to make one computer. So that distribution is not equal. A couple more things we want to just mention for this chapter that we didn't really cover on here. We sometimes talk about positive and normative statements in economics. We want to make sure we distinguish between those two statements. A normative statement is something that has someone's twist on it. In other words, they're saying what they believe. A positive statement is pretty much stating what the facts are. A good example would be if I were to say that the unemployment right now, let's go back to the recession period. The unemployment during the recession hit a high of a little over 10%, 10.1% unemployment. That would be a positive statement. That would be something that we could identify with and be a positive statement. Then I might also say that since the unemployment was 10.1%, the government should have started some work programs to help get people employed, to help lower that unemployment rate. That would be a normative statement. I'm putting my views on it. I'm casting my opinions on it. And you're going to have a lot of positive statements. A lot of economists make positive statements to come to the conclusion of their normative statements. They're going to add what they ought to, and that's where the differences in economics comes from. Somebody says if you line up 100 economists against the wall, you're going to get 100 different answers to a question. Because they were still working with the same facts, but they're adding their views. Anytime we add our views to it, that's going to be a normative statement. The other thing that I wanted to mention briefly was the idea called utility. Utility we don't talk about a whole lot in macroeconomics. It's more of a micro concept. But we want to know what that utility is. And basically when we talk about utility, we're talking about satisfies our needs and wants. How does that item satisfy the needs and wants that we have? In other words, if I'm really hungry and I go to a buffet and I'm planning on going there to eat, I'm very hungry and I have a high utility for food right now. Everything smells good, everything tastes good. I want to get a little bit of everything. So I'll go through and I'll get a plate of food. After I finish that plate of food, my utility for food is not as high. My need or my want for that food is not as high. So when I go back through the line again, I'm going to pick and choose. I'm going to get the things that maybe I haven't tried before, maybe a few things of that, and not do as much as, but my utility, my need or my want for those items are not as high. So when we talk about utility, we're talking about the satisfaction, usefulness, or value one obtains from consuming goods or services. These can be any goods or services. That's all for this chapter. We'll talk about it more in class.